r/AskReddit. Reddit. What became of the least popular kids in your high school? He was a friend of mine. While I never fit in with any of the cliques in school, I got along pretty well with just about anyone. He didn't make many friends or talk to anyone most days. He just seemed withdrawn and a bit odd sometimes. I met him in first grade, and while we weren't best friends, we talked quite a bit, hung out once in a while, and had some good times over the years. He was a bit of an outcast through most of school, probably only had one or two other friends besides me. He was ridiculed, called names, and worst, he was just downright ignored. After high school he worked a few places, finally ending up at the local Walmart. I would still stop and see him and hang out when I was home from college. About 3 years after we graduated, his mother passed away from cancer. 3 months later his father had a heart attack and passed away as well. Understandably, for a time after he lost his parents, he just seemed completely off his rails. I honestly thought he was going to self-destruct. He worked through it with some professional help, and he was putting his life back together. I spent some time helping him whenever I could, and he was healing. A year to almost the day that his mother died, he didn't show up for work and didn't call off. Even at his lowest, after he lost his parents, he showed up when he was scheduled, or at the very least call off. His boss called me because I guess I was the only person left he knew to list as a contact. I left work after I got the call and went to make sure he was okay, make sure he wasn't so sick or something that he couldn't call off work. I found him dead at 10:17 AM, still in bed. The image of that moment will be burned into my mind forever. I found out later that he passed in his sleep from an undiagnosed condition, something that caused multiple organ failures. He was 22 years old. Godspeed, Dave. I hope you found some peace in whatever comes next. It has to be better than the hand you were dealt in this life. He wasn't massively unpopular as such. I think most people liked him fine, but he was pretty quiet and kind of didn't really register with most people. He was just invisible rather than disliked. I remember once, when we were about 15, he invited me to a party at his house. I didn't really know him that well, but as a few of my other friends were going, I accepted. However, when I got there on the day, he told me that everyone else cancelled and it was just going to be the two of us. Okay, slightly annoying, but let's just play some computer games or whatever. Within minutes of my arrival, he had a screaming match with his mother, who then left for the evening. I feel like maybe he hadn't really told her that I was going to be there, and I barely even knew this kid, so it was very tense and awkward. The house was horrible too, very messy and gloomy. I just wanted to fake an emergency and get my mum to pick me up right away, but I felt a bit sorry for him, so I decided to stick it out. At one point, I went to the bathroom, and when I came out he had turned out all of the lights in the house, which was now plunged into total darkness. I was trying to feel and fumble my way around an unfamiliar space, but didn't know where anything was, and it was so dark. He lived in the countryside that my eyes didn't adjust. Then I heard him sneaking around the house, kind of brushing past me and giggling every now and then, but not responding to my increasingly terrified calls. I kept bumping into things and didn't know where the light switches were. This went on for a few minutes and my heart was racing. So it had gone from an awkward evening to a fairly disturbing one within 30 minutes of my arrival. Eventually, he turned the lights back on and was like, "Lol, wanna help me build a computer?" I obviously didn't, but it seemed like an activity which would involve the lights being on and him not scuttling around the house like a serial killer, so I was all for it. I remember him dropping an important piece, which shattered, and him getting really angry at himself, while I just sat there desperately hoping he wasn't going to turn to the darkness again. I was trying to offer encouragement like, "Hey, do you know what I think would help? Keeping the lights on and being normal." Anyway, I'm in my 30s now, and I found out a few years ago that he killed himself in that house shortly after we finished school. Someone told me his dad has also hung himself in that house, although I can't be 100% sure that's true. He obviously had deeper issues than I realized, but being a selfish teenager I didn't make the connection at the time. Edit. Since posting this last night, I remembered why he and his mum had a screaming match when I first arrived. She was cooking burgers for dinner and asked him how many we wanted. He said 17 and a half. which I actually still think is fucking hilarious, but she blew up at him while I just stood there awkwardly trying to figure out a way to politely go home. There wasn't one. My twin brother was voted most shy in high school. He had some pretty severe social anxiety which caused him to basically go silent and still. If anyone tried to talk to him, he couldn't pay for something at a store or really interact much with anyone at all in the real world. His only escape was Ultima Online with a few close online friends, and he was pretty hardcore committed to his guild and role playing. He almost didn't graduate because we were required to do a senior project and give a presentation to a group of peers. We went away to college together and shared a dorm room. He stayed pretty close to me that first day and I basically told him he couldn't be on my hip constantly and he needed to learn to fend for himself. I came back maybe the next day and all his stuff was packed up and gone. He had gone back to live with our mother and promptly knocked up the one odd girl who gave him any attention. They married, had another kid, moved to another state where he got a job as a driller on an oil rig. She left him. He met a carbon copy of her and knocked her up too. That woman also left him. He then met an army widow with a young daughter and the relationship seemed to be stable. He got to bring his children to their home frequently and seemed to be doing okay. His social anxiety was still present, but he had learned to make it manageable. He had been deathly skinny in and after high school because he barely ate, but now he was still skinny but had taken on a muscular physique due to the nature of his work. He was always into drawing and sculpture and had still been practicing through all of it. Now I'd love for his story to continue down this optimistic path, but fate can be a cruel dice toss with no remorse. He was constantly pulling long drives between commutes to work and seeing his scattered children. One early morning in 2015 on some long stretch of icy road there was an accident which took his life. There's a lot more to the story I left out. There's some things that worsened his anxiety leading up to high school, but it was only aggravating a pre-existing conditions. He faced a lot of torment from kids when they saw an easy target who wouldn't fight back. But he never got angry. He was always the most calm and caring person. In middle school we raised ducklings for a class assignment and had the option to take it home after. He chose to. He doted on that duckling as if it was the most precious thing on the planet. And when it died shortly after, he cried and fell into a deep depression for 2 weeks. He had the same concern towards his children, especially his youngest, and I'm sure it was difficult for him to be separated from them so regularly. He faced so much negativity in his life but it never shook his core integrity. He never complained. He remained the druid character he adopted in Ultima Online. And now when someone's gone, all we remember is what we didn't do for them when we should have. This one kid in my class was always picked on. I remember him being picked on all the way into 3rd grade and all the way through to graduation. I was always nice to him. He was a pretty nice guy, did average in class, and was into the same video games as me. In 5th or 4th grade I stood up to the boys bullying him in class when the teacher stepped out of the room. They were saying mean things to him, and I just stood up and told the bullies that they were being jerks. Big deal because I was the quiet teacher's pet of the class. They stopped bothering him that day, but it didn't last long. The bullying seemed to get worse in middle school. People would make unfunny jokes that he would end up a school shooter. In middle school he asked me out, but I did not share his feelings. Plus I wasn't allowed to date till high school. Once I was in high school I dated a different guy all the way through graduation, so he never had the chance to ask me out again. Plus he ended up getting a girlfriend in high school eventually, though he was made fun of because she was a few years younger than him and was very short, almost like a child. While in college I learned that unpopular boy had allegedly molested his sister's child. I think he is in prison now, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the case at all because I can't bear to learn what he may have done. Update: my boyfriend's cousin has him as a friend on Facebook. He is not in prison and has been working in a different town. Officially he was charged with 2nd-degree sexual assault of a minor. That's all I'm going to look into on the subject. People would make unfunny jokes that he would end up a school shooter. That was me at one point, the butt of the joke that is. I had an extremely short temper, which while it mellowed out by the time I was senior didn't endear me to many, and made me a target for others. One of the kids I went to school with actually told me he found the song I would shoot the school up to, played it to me, and narrated the whole sequence, as if it was a really bad Michael Bay production. It was a different time, so I'm assuming it wouldn't fly now, but truth be told thought it was pretty funny that someone thought the whole thing out. That kid is pretty much the most hated, least popular, and least liked kid in school. You're probably in second though, dude. That was my best friend at the time who said that, and I appreciated his honesty. I'd always suspected it was true as well. The kid he was talking about was this openly gay kid. Sometimes he'd switch it around and say he had a girlfriend, Ruth from another town. I think he might have even told an Asian girl to fuck him once, but it might have been a rumor. There were lots of stupid rumors. Like that I was a pedophile who'd been raping children since I was a child. I was just a pale emaciated ghost-like boy. I suppose I looked like that one creepy kid on Parks and Rec, or in. The gay kid though had his moments. He was quite fat and could fit a pen fully into the thick flaps of his fat, hold it in there as long as he wanted, and then fire it at people he didn't like. He couldn't always launch it with enough force for it to completely go across the room, but sometimes he could. But anyways, long story short, he works a gas station now. But man is he a happy guy who seems to like his job. I don't know if he's a manager, but he feels like one, like the other employees see him and respect him as such. He's always up for a great conversation whenever I return to town to gas up my car. It makes me glad to see him. I had a Facebook chat with him and asked him why everyone seemed to not like us. His response was something like, who cares? It doesn't matter now, hardly matter then. Me, I work odd jobs. I've been happy working with schizophrenics as a behavior aid, but I've been studying to get my 450 to drive a bus or a RAPS truck to start making more money. I think more money would really improve my life socially and emotionally. I also write a lot on the side. I still don't have very many friends, but I usually have conversations with service industry people and coworkers that always feels genuinely and mutually enjoyable. My friends I only see once every 2 weeks or once a month. Maybe that's just adulting. I should join a D&D dungeon. If social lives were put into a structured system it'd be easier to excel at it. There were a couple of guys that nobody really associated with because they were annoying as piss, but they were the best of friends. I interacted with them sparingly because I was part of the nobody likes me crowd too, but I could only take them in small doses. One was, okay, do you know that character in Mad TV, Rusty, who is easily scandalized and sheltered, and very loud and obnoxious, and doesn't know when to shut his mouth? Imagine that guy if he was nearly blind and also homophobic while being in deep denial that he's homophobic. I have nothing against gay people so long as they don't touch me. His best friend was a very passive guy with a stutter and extremely niche nerd interests who hadn't got a break from bullies since he was a kid and was actually very well off. His dad was a lawyer and nice. I'd talk to him frequently when his friend wasn't around. Skip ahead to now, and the kid with the stutter grew up to be very odd but happy. He fell into furry stuff, found an outlet for a lot of his creative impulses, and his confidence shot up by 200%. He still stutters, but it got better, and he's not as nervous or shy as he used to be. He also came out as bisexual and had an, admittedly kind of annoying, boyfriend for a while, which shocked and appalled his louder best friend, who then got over it and is now an alright guy, too. He started pursuing his hobbies. His love of anime and video games led to a legitimate adoration for martial arts. Picked up art despite his bad eyesight. He's doing a project centered on his color blindness right now, and has become a lot more tolerant because of his bro. Recently, he got a girlfriend, and seems really happy. We talk from time to time on Facebook about art and stuff. So, you know, unorthodox but happy endings. I'm glad they got them and became better, more confident people. A girl in my class wasn't exactly unpopular, but she was very difficult to connect with because she was very socially awkward. She was kind of a part of my gang, but like I said, she was sort of hard to connect with, so she was never truly a full worthy member of the gang, but she still had lunch with us and stuck with us during pet, etc. We think she kinda craved attention because she kept putting herself in these situations where she needed help and had to be rescued, like getting stuck and stuff, and getting hurt and stuff like that, but it always ended up being more comical and the entire class would have to do whatever we could do not start laughing. We know that she either felt bullied, or that might also have been an attention-seeking thing, that she said she was being bullied, but she really wasn't. She didn't need to make up stuff for us to feel sorry for her. She lost her mum in a car accident when we were like 10 or 11 years old. Our teacher arranged for the entire class to come to the funeral to support her. Not too long after the death of her mother, she had an epileptic seizure during class. We know that she felt lonely, and me and the gang were hanging out with her after class as well as during the school hours, but it was almost as if she had this one wall that we just couldn't break through. I always wished for her to grow up and find some guy who was like a perfect match and get married and have children. Unfortunately, that never happened because one night she had a massive epileptic seizure and passed away. She was still living at home, so her father was the one who found her the next morning. Her little brother played the guitar during her funeral in the same church where we held the funeral for her mother just some years prior. It kills me to know that she felt so lonely for entire life and she never got her happy ending. 40 years later, many of my classmates are all dead. One of the most popular kids died only a year after leaving a high school, having been killed in a car crash while under the influence, and he took 3 other people with him in the same truck. Another friend of mine died in a single car crash, and I was sad to hear of it. He was one of the popular kids, but a quiet sort, and was friendly to all. Truly a great human being, and he wasn't dismissed. Others died of drug overdoses and the like. I ran into one of my friends who was one of the out crowd, and he ended up leaving high school and toured Europe and the Middle East working on a wide range of projects. He returned to the US about 7 or 8 years later, and I bumped into him. He had a lot more cynical view of the world, and I felt pretty sad for him. Not sure what made him that way, but he was not the same upbeat guy I had known. As for some of the other least popular students, many of those who were not in the in crowd have gone on to lead successful lives and done some pretty amazing things. I was one of those kids who never fit in, most definitely in the out crowd, lol. And finally, when I began my growth spurt in my junior year, began to fight back against the bullies and held my own against them. Spent a lot of time in the principal's office, and remember one vice principal who demanded I take the beatings from his high profile jock friends, and whose advice to take it I summarily ignored and ended up enduring a very tough junior year until I got into a pretty nasty fight with one guy, and which made the point to all it was not worth picking on me. By that time I was 6 foot 1 inch and was hitting back enough to make it count. After that, on my return the following senior year, it was the most quiet and wonderful year, and I felt like I escaped a prison sentence when I left that place. Kids can be so cruel without realizing the things they are doing at the time. College was so different and a much more satisfying place. Who knew school could actually be fun? Personally, I sometimes wish I had been homeschooled to avoid the poisonous social scene in high school, and can only wonder how it is for kids these days in the public school system. Only advice I have for the out crowd kids these days is to grit your teeth and do not give up. Get through it. This too shall pass. I ended up in high-tech work for about 7 years, and then went into aerospace for 32 years, and worked on a wide range of propulsion projects including Space Shuttle, Titan, Delta, Mars Rover, Hubble, Curiosity and other cool projects. Worked with some of the best in the business, and loved my career. Just retired last year, and I'm starting a small business of my own to have fun with and to go see the country, and write about it as well. It's funny how it works out. Being one of the out crowd worked well for me, not how it felt at the time though, and most of the others like me. And the lone reunion I attended some years back showed me just how the ones like me who studied hard, didn't get sucked into drugs and drinking, and who never gave up on their dreams, went on to lead successful and amazing lives. As for the in-crowd people, they were basically the same people as when I last saw them, just with older appearances and a lot of life scars from hard lessons when they found out life didn't revolve around them post high school. I think some of the happiest ones are those who never gave up and worked through the outcast label and focused on what made them happy instead of chasing peer approval. It's a valuable life lesson if you choose to see adversity for the great teacher it is, even if it feels bad at the time. As the old saying from Galaxy Quest says, never give up, never surrender. This kid was only in my class for the 8th grade, class of about 35 to 40 students, so nothing big, but this is too relevant of a topic for me, since he's actually in some headlines right now. This kid immediately seemed really strange and kinda creepy. He had jet black dyed hair that covered his eyes. I had long hair too from middle school to high school, so that wasn't it. Piercing light blue eyes, and loved metal and dark shit. I liked metal and dark shit, so we talked occasionally at school. I rode the bus with him after school, so I found out a little about him. He definitely had his demons, but he seemed at least like a decent person. Well, he ends up transferring. No idea where he went off to. Nobody knew anything. Rumors were that he went to juvie. He's gone. Well, I was working at a grocery store from when I was 18 until I was 22 last year. This dude out of nowhere got a job with Coca-Cola, so he'd come by the store 4 or 5 days a week and would stock us up. I'd conversate with him a little here and there. He had a nice haircut, a couple tats on his arm, but nothing bad or anything. Seemed like a cool dude who kinda got his shit together. Decided to look him up on Facebook one night. Swastikas everywhere. Hitler quotes. Photos of him wearing white supremacist gear. I was stunned. Never talked to him again. Shortly afterwards he got fired for arguing with a manager from a different store about the Holocaust. He was trying to convince the manager that it never happened. Well, I guess now this dude goes to UNL and has been incredibly open about his racist views. He's been seen in white supremacist rallies, assaulting people. A video of him talking in a video conference to other members, saying about how he wants to be violent, but how he needs to wait for the right time. It's disgusting. The entire campus is pissed about it, yet the school won't do anything. I truly believe this kid is dangerous. I was rather surprised that one of the least liked kids on my high school team turned out to be a fine man later in life. Without sounding too mean, he reminded me of Porky from Lord of Flies. Short, round, freckly, with red hair. Generally nosy and abrasive with a nasally tone. He was very concerned with looking cool and being right all the time. He was rarely either, much to our amusement. Worse yet, he had the nerve to essentially tattle to his mom about teammates being mean. We called him a baby oftentimes, though he never appreciated the irony. As captain back then I had several awkward conversations with his mother, which helped see how he turned out so bad. She was up every ass she could find. Her life was miserable, and it was everyone else's fault. Eventually I noticed he would instigate fights and bother people until he got bullied and then make a fuss to an authority figure. Attention seeking and pity parties all the time. I grew to see him as an annoying little brother that needed extra attention. I would often intervene when he would throw fits, pull him aside, and talk him down. I made an impact apparently. Several years on I ran into him in our hometown. He was fresh out of college and nearly 6 feet tall, very fit, and far more charming. He had a girlfriend and was getting ready to move out to Boston for a job. Seemed that bring away from his mom did him a world of good. He thanked me for being, in his own words, very cool with him during the year I was captain as a senior. Either way he really turned around, and it was nice to see. He's in his mid-20s now, and from what I see on Facebook he is doing swell. Nice to know people do sometimes grow out of bad behaviors. Hope this format is right as I'm typing this on my phone. This kid was a real shit talker. No one really bothered him or picked on him because he was quite capable of making a fool of himself without needing our help. I shall call him Dennis. Now Dennis may have had a learning disability as he required a teacher's aide to help him read and write, but at face value he seemed fine. There are many stories about Dennis that made him the weird kid at school. Dennis claimed to have invented a drug called gel that was 10 times as strong as meth, and that he had taken it at school and said he was high but could maintain a sober state. Dennis claimed him and his brother were street fighters, and that he had never lost a match. He told about how someone had dislocated his arm and he punched them with it, which not only knocked out his opponent, but also popped his shoulder back in. Okay Dennis, I don't think our small town in New Zealand really had much of an underground fight scene, but okay. He also claimed to be a prestigious game developer and that he was working on a game that would be a futuristic RPG with in-depth game mechanics and 1000s of hours or gameplay. Fast forward a couple years. After we graduate, I may have been put into a paddy wagon for breaching the liquor ban of the city I was living in. Lo and behold, I see Dennis in the processing room with me. I was quite sober at this point and said, "Hey, are you Dennis? Long time no see." He replied, "You're cookin' nuts, I never forget a face." Alright, I asked how he was. All things conserved, we were both in the processing room. He tells me how his friends wouldn't leave him alone and thought he was trying to injure himself in his car, which he said he totally wasn't. I just said, "Oh shit, I hope you're alright, at least your friends care enough to make the call, and hey, at least you're not in here for breaching the liquor ban like a certain someone." He said, "Yeah, I suppose." Saw him being housed in the glass holding cell so he could be closely monitored when I was leaving until they thought he was ready to leave. Fast forward to last year, where he interviewed to be my best friend's flat replacement in a new city. He apparently was looking for a flat there as he was going to school for animation. My friend said, "All yours," so I presume he is still up there studying for now. Glad that he found something to do, and I hope it works out for him. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel.